this is Hina, aka the Crazy Cat Writer, and I am back with writing FAQ series. This is going to be episode 2, and today again I'll be answering 5 questions that have been asked. So, before we proceed further, I would like to ask you to please subscribe to my channel, and also if you want to stay updated on latest videos and webinars, then do click on the bell icon below so that you will receive a notification every time I either post a video or go live. So let's begin with today's question. Okay, so the first question for this week is from Ramcharan. He goes by the name Late Night Thinkers on Instagram. And the question is how to make fiction look or feel more real. Okay, so when we are talking about fictional worlds, they have to always feel real. The first thing that you should do in order to make sure that your fiction feels more real is to create realistic settings. Now, settings do not only mean the location where we base the story, the primary location, but settings also include the time period that we work with, the historical settings of a place, the sociological and the social atmosphere of the place, the economic environment of the place, etc. So, settings include all these things. So, when I say create realistic settings, what I actually mean is if you're working with a timeline that is different from the present date time, then always make sure to research adequately for it. Secondly, if you're basing your story in a time period that is present day, then always make sure to put enough research into it so that you at least get the days, the months, and the public holidays, any significant events that happen in the present day time reflect in your story's timeline, because these are some things that people do not pay attention to, and it always results into your fiction not feeling real at all. Secondly, when we talk about settings, I would like to talk about location. Make sure that you're working with a location that you are really familiar with. Try not to take locations that you have rarely been to, or that you haven't studied closely, or you haven't observed closely, or you're not very familiar with, because it is going to show in your fiction. There's so many elements that have to be considered, because if these small elements are not taken into consideration while working on a fiction story, it will reflect in your prose, it will reflect in your story, and your story will come across as not realistic at all. Therefore, in order to make your story feel more real, your fiction feel more real, you have to work on creating realistic settings. The second thing that I would like to advise for making your fiction feel more real is to create realistic characters. And realistic characters can be created by working on the internal conflicts nicely, by having dynamic and round characters, by also making your secondary characters dynamic and round, or static and round. Basically, what we are looking for is good, round, whole characters. Just because a character appears only twice or thrice in your novel and have very less narrative function in your story, then it does not mean that you do not work on that character. You need to have very well developed characters in order to make your fiction feel real, because without realistic characters, your fiction will not feel real at all. Another point to consider is to always make sure to make your character, especially the main character, have some kind of flaws that the readers can connect with, because real people are hardly perfect, they're never perfect. So you need to make sure that your main characters and your protagonists, and even your antagonist for that matter, and the secondary characters, as well as side or supporting cast of characters, should have conflicts, should have some kinds of flaw in them, in order for your readers to be able to connect with them. nicely and properly and in a way that you want them to. The next thing that also has to be worked on while working on a fiction story is the dialogue. Now, when I talk about dialogues, I mean all the dialogues. Always make sure that you are using dialogues that sound natural, that do not sound made up. There are a lot of techniques that you can use in order to make sure that your dialogue sounds realistic, because realistic characters need to have realistic dialogues, and dialogues are rarely something that a lot of writers pay attention to. And because of that, uh, the story really falls flat on its face, because even if you have a single dialogue that doesn't sound real, it is going to pull your reader out of your story, and then you are not going to have a very realistic story. Therefore, in order to make your fiction feel realistic, you have to pay attention to the four major things that I just told you about, that is settings, characterization, dialogues, and internal conflict, or the flaws of the character. While I'm on this topic, I would also like to suggest you that if you're working on a fiction story, then make sure to select the right plot structure for your story that goes well with your story. Otherwise, your story is not going to be as well planned as it should be, because creating a fiction world or creating a fiction story takes a lot of effort, and all that effort can go to waste if the planning is not done correctly. Now, planning is something that a lot of writers do not pay a lot of attention to, and this can actually be seen in a lot of novels that you will read, which do not feel real at all. So you also have to consider the plot structure, and that is how you can create fiction that feels real. Okay, so moving on, question number 2. Question number 2 is from Vishaka, who is also one of my students. Her question is, what is the difference between showing and telling? Okay, so I can give you 5 points that will help you differentiate between showing and telling, because a lot of people do have a lot of problems understanding the concept of show versus tell. So this will help them as well. So the differences between showing and telling are: showing uses strong verbs, whereas telling uses adverbs. Most of them, most of the time, these adverbs are unnecessary. That's why we tell you to not use a lot of adverbs and to use strong verbs. The second difference is that showing relies on action and reaction of the characters, whereas telling relies on the descriptive summary by the narrator or the author. Third, showing is done using narration, strong narration, whereas telling is done using a lot of exposition and descriptions. Showing uses indirect characterization and telling uses direct characterization. And last and the most important thing that you need to keep in mind regarding showing versus telling is that in showing, the author makes the readers experience the characters' feelings or emotions, whereas in telling, the author tells or lets the reader know about a character's feelings or emotions. So those are the difference between telling and showing. Question number 3 is from Naveen Kumar Reddy Naladimu. The question is, what should writers do when they get stuck without any ideas? Now, I have recently posted a reel regarding this, what to do when you're not feeling inspired, which is somewhat on the same lines. So, what I can tell you is, if generally, when a writer doesn't feel inspired to write, what they generally do is they go for prompt writing. I generally do so because prompt writing is something that I really love, and prompt writing has helped me a lot in my initial days of writing, as well as whenever I'm not feeling up to writing a lot, or I just don't have a new idea, which is very rare, at least in the recent years. So, the first thing that I can tell you is To go for prompt writing, you can go for photo prompt writing or word prompt writing. There are a lot of websites that share photo prompts with you or something like that. But what you can do is you can just open Pixabay and open the editor's pick images and just pick one image and write whatever comes to your mind in within 1,000 words or within 500 words, whatever suits you. The second thing that you can do is rewrite one of your favorite stories, or you can just write down about your childhood memories, or you can write down a letter to someone you like, someone you love, or you can just write a letter or a piece of homage to someone you really admire or you haven't seen in a long time. Another thing you can do is simply take a break, because if you are running out of ideas because of having worked a lot on your writing, then I would definitely suggest taking a break. Another thing you can do is read. This is a given. Read a lot of books, read as much as you can, and read whatever you can, because when you read, you are definitely going to find some of the other idea or inspiration. I always find inspiration when I'm reading, so you will always find inspiration when you're reading. So read a lot, keep on reading even if you're writing. Otherwise, you can just sit down and brainstorm ideas. I really don't suggest forcing out ideas. Therefore, I always recommend keeping an idea journal. Idea journal is basically a journal in which you write down all your ideas whenever you get them. Now, idea journal comes in very handy in cases or situations like this. Okay, so moving on, the next question is by Roxy. And the question is, how can I write an online story or poetry, and which site is better for writing? Okay, well, you can use a lot of platforms for writing, but the one that I highly suggest is WordPress. Creating a blog on WordPress and just posting your stories or poetry as blog posts. Uh, I have been using WordPress from last 7 years, so I highly recommend WordPress. I've never had any issues regarding WordPress ever. Another platform that you can use is Blogger. When I initially started blogging, I started with Blogger platform, but then I had to switch to WordPress, I switched to WordPress within a month or something, but within a month or two, I guess. So because the interface of WordPress was a lot better than Blogger. Another platform that you can use is Wattpad. Then now there are a lot of new uh, platforms such as Medium. Then there's Tumblr, Smashwords. Another good website is Comaful. I have recently started browsing through Comaful and I really like it. And that's it. You can use any of these platforms and you'll be good to go. Okay, so the last question for today is from Farooq Hussain. And the question is, how many hours does it take to write 10 pages? Okay, now this is very subjective. It actually depends on how much you can write or which idea you're working on. Generally, if I have to write 10 pages, I think I can probably write them in an hour or two if I'm working on an idea that I really like. But if I'm writing it for some reason, only because I have to and not because I want to, then it might probably take me 2 days and maybe 5 to 6 hours, because then I'll have to brainstorm ideas to come up for the content. But I guess it shouldn't take you more than 3 to 5 hours for writing 10 pages. It's like 10 pages, at least not the first draft. So 3 to 5 3 to 5 hours would be my answer. But if you're a beginner writer, it might actually take you 10 days. So if you are a beginner writer, then I would suggest writing only 1 page a day. That should be enough. So okay, so these were the questions for this week. I will be back with another FAQ episode next week, so stay tuned. And also, if you have any doubts or any questions regarding fiction writing or creative writing in general, or regarding specific topics such as characterization, plot structures, or dialogue writing, themes, point of views, etc. Feel free to comment below and leave your question here. I will definitely try to include them in my next video. Thanks a lot for watching. I will see you all next week. Bye.